Welcome everyone. Thank you very much indeed for participating, joining this really first EDGE webinar in relation to the Non Habitual Residency Programme, which will be presented by my colleague, Senior Associate Gonçalo Figueira, who's one of the, if not the key member of the NHR team. My name is Jeffrey Graham. I'm Senior Partner at EDGE International Lawyers. And what we're trying to do here, I suppose, is provide information and some activity, if you like, under the restrictions which we currently have due to COVID-19. So it's been a wonderful response, I have to say, to the webinar. Thank you all very much indeed for participating and taking an interest in it. I am recording this, so it will be available on the new site which we've just launched, which is COVID19legal.pt. We will be circulating details of that at the end of the webinar and to all of you who have enrolled. So you'll see there more details of the services that we have as lawyers, ongoing services during the COVID-19 crisis, I suppose, the state of emergency, which is affecting us all. But what was quite, I'm sure many of you indeed saw the recent article from Forbes showing Portugal as one of, if not the best place to live in the world post COVID-19. So I think that left a very timely reminder that Portugal hasn't gone away. For those of you who are not here already in the country, Portugal is still very much here, and all of the things which have made Portugal attractive in the first place to non-habitual residents, they continue to be out there in terms of nature, beaches, weather, all of those attributes, culture, community, and indeed in relation to the community, I think that has shown itself to be a very effective community during the time of the COVID-19 crisis and the state of emergency, whereby people have been compliant. And as a result, we feel that that Portugal is slightly ahead of the curve in terms of dealing with the crisis. Of course, the crisis is still ongoing, will have a significant economic impact, but there have been measures introduced to mitigate that for Portuguese businesses. So I'm not going to say any more than that. I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Gonçalo Figueira, who will tell you more about actually the NHR process and the NHR changes and the position regarding NHR, which is very much an NHR process which is still running, still going. Yes, it's taking a little bit longer because we have certain logistical issues we have to deal with, but we're none of which are insurmountable. So, Gonçalo, over to you.
Boa tarde, e thank you very much for all of you. It's quite a large number of people who have very kindly accepted our invitation to share this presentation. I hope you can all see the presentation PowerPoint in your screens. So I will start just with a brief introductory note. This is, as Jeffrey said, the first EDGE webinar. We have been around for a long time, for over 30 years, and in good times and in bad times. And this is certainly one of those moments that no one could expect, a black swan, as some people call it. But EDGE and our team and our offices throughout Portugal are very much still open and active, and this is a time where we are working harder than ever in order to help our clients and our partners. And Everyone in the firm is doing a tremendous effort to continue to provide all the services and to continue to assist our clients and our partners. And this is something we are very proud of. We have been achieving tremendous results in terms of getting things done. We have deeds being signed, escrituras, in our office, in-house. We have wills being signed and being drafted. We have all sorts of advice being provided, as always. And we have actually people, clients, getting their tax numbers, getting their NHRs. I think there is very little, from driving licenses to opening bank accounts to all sorts of services, that we are not being able to achieve and to attend the client's needs. And that's a very important message in our first webinar that we really want to convey. We are here to assist, to help, and we have always had the ability to think out of the box. And certainly this is a time where we are developing that more than ever. So I'm going to start with some of you, most of you know us. We are the only law firm in Portugal where the vast majority of our clients are not Portuguese. We have Portuguese clients as well, and they are very much welcome, but the vast majority of our clients are foreign. So that's what makes it really different. Our old experience, all of our lawyers, all of our team is really has a deep knowledge of how to assist and what are the needs of foreign clients, either they are individuals or they are companies. Our firm has almost every area of law and all departments that can assist: corporate and commercial, property and tourism, litigation, employment, residency by investment. And amongst our clients are foreign embassies, multinationals, families who have been in Portugal for generations, and people that come every day. And in the last few years, in the last few months, people who are coming to live in Portugal, coming to invest in Portugal. And I know we received emails every day that as soon as borders are open again, they will come again. Because, as Jeffrey said, Portugal keeps all its attractiveness, and people are just waiting for the borders to reopen. So let me start to get into the subject of this presentation. Just a very brief note to reiterate that we have put together a specific COVID-19 team. It's like a task force, so that we have followed very closely all of the legal framework, all of the legal publications that have the Portuguese government has done a tremendous effort as well, must be said. And they've published legislation on weekends and holidays. So we are following that very closely, and we have a team from all the departments on the firm to assist you from the more complex to the more administrative matter. So that is something that you can count on to want any particular service. We continue to operate in any service that we used to, and even some services that we normally didn't provide, and we now do. So let me just, I will start now the subject matter itself, NHR. Edge was probably one of the first law firms in Portugal to assist and register NHR clients. This law was introduced in 2009. In the first few years, it wasn't really in its full capacity, but after some changes, it has now since some 6 or 7 years ago been attracting a lot of people from all over the world, in particular from European countries, and we know the latest numbers show that there are over 30,000 NHR registered clients in Portugal. So that's really something. So what was the idea of creating NHR? It started after a financial crisis in 2008. And the main goal was to attract new tax residents to Portugal, in particular high net worth individuals and people with high added value activities. So this was designed in conjunction with the European Union, so that there was no conflict with European Union law. And what the main idea is that a new tax resident that has not been a Portuguese tax resident in the previous 5 years would be able to have special benefits in declaring and in the taxation of its worldwide income. So the main types of income which are beneficial under NHR are pensions, dividends, interests, royalties, and professional income. All of this when we are talking about income from outside Portugal. Because the rule as a Portuguese tax resident and an NHR, even though a special one is a Portuguese tax resident, the rule is that you, as a Portuguese tax resident, you need to declare your worldwide income. So most of these incomes, depending on the double taxation treaty applicable with the source country, are now for an NHR where basically under some sort of benefit, either fully exempt or with a very reduced rate. So as I mentioned, the beauty of and probably one of the reasons for the success of the legislation, it's quite simple in its implementation. You need to be a Portuguese tax resident, and you cannot have been a Portuguese tax resident in the previous 5 years. And then you can maintain this. It's not for life, and it's not renewable. You can maintain the status for 10 years. So once you become an NHR, as I've mentioned, you will be exempt from personal income tax on qualifying income if the double taxation treaty, as most do, the double taxation treaties are based on a common model, the OECD model. So if it can be subject to tax in the country of source, even if it's not effectively taxed. When there is no double taxation treaty, it is still considered, it should not consider as Portuguese source income under domestic rules. So under the OECD model, you are also exempt on your qualifying income. For Portuguese sourced income, the only applicable advantage of NHR is for professional income if you are on a list, which we can later provide to you, of high added value activities. If you have a Portuguese employment or self-employment, you will benefit from a special flat rate of 20% regardless of the amount of your income. So one of the messages we want to convey is that the tax authorities and EDGE has not stopped working on, or it is still possible to become an NHR. And we had a number of clients who have become an NHR during the state of emergency in Portugal. And so I will explain briefly what we have done so far. So all the stages of the process, getting your first Portuguese tax number, the NIF, as a non-resident, then change your status from non-resident to resident, and finally making the application for NHR, it's still possible. And we have done that. And obviously we continue with the normal advice and further advice on structures and ancillary services that are connected to becoming an HR and to moving to Portugal. Sorry, I just went. So normally what we have tried to do, and as much as possible, was to keep the existing successful model of work that we had before all of this started. And so we continue to do, when we are first contacted by the client, we undertake a fact-finding and a due diligence on the current tax position of the client. Each case is a case, and so it's not the whole NHR service. When you instruct a professional like a lawyer, it's not just to register you. That's important, but that's just the final step of the process. It's very important to understand how it can benefit you, what you need to do before, if you need any restructuring of your income, so that you have the best possible advantages by being or by becoming an HR. Since we started working on NHR, we have a very good relation with the Portuguese authorities. And our admin staff, our legal staff, who have been going to several departments for years or even decades, in certain cases, they know the people there. And so we have been able to perform miracles by getting tax numbers when the tax departments are close to the public, and basically getting through a number of documents and requests that make possible that the whole process continues. A very important for us, a very important part of our service is the administrative services, because when you move to Portugal, you basically have a number of different things that you need, and we as a firm also provide that side. So either it's registering at the local health center for you to obtain a national health service number, which is something that now it's fundamental, and our NHS is being widely praised, not only in Portugal, but internationally, for its response to this situation. We are helping with the registration or exchange of foreign driving licenses, opening bank accounts in Portuguese banks, even throughout this state of emergency, this pandemic. We book meetings at the banks, people we work with for a long time, and so what do we accomplish? That basically our service continues to be provided as before, and that for us is very important. So as I've said, that it's very important to reiterate. What do you need to become a non-habitual resident? Be a Portuguese tax resident, not to have been a Portuguese tax resident in the previous 5 years from the year you want to become an HR. So what do you need in order to become a Portuguese tax resident? The Portuguese tax law has evolved in this last few years, and there's been an alteration in terms of making it more flexible to become a Portuguese tax resident. If you compare to other countries in Europe, in the UK, for example, the Portuguese system is much more flexible. So we still use the 183 days, which is an international criteria. So if you spend that time in Portugal, you are deemed as a Portuguese tax resident, but you don't need to wait for being here 183 days. Basically, by declaration, so the Portuguese tax authorities believe your word, which is good. You declare that your Portuguese address is your main address worldwide, is your habitual domicile. So they take your word for it, but they also ask for some sort of evidence. And you can show a rental contract or the deed of purchase of your Portuguese address. If you are not Portuguese national, some tax departments, most of them, also ask for your residency permit. Now, if you are a citizen of a European Union country, that's just a formality. It's something that we also assist with. So what you have to do is we book an appointment with the town hall of where you live, and basically in the same day, in the same moment, it's issued a European Union registration certificate, which basically is your residency permit in Portugal. During this state of emergency, there are some town halls that are opening exceptions to the previous rule, which was that even with it was the only step of the process where you needed to go in person. They needed to see you. Normally we work with a power of attorney from the clients, and we can go to obtain any document in any department, in any public department, without the need for the client to be there. But for the residency permit at the town hall, you normally needed to go yourself. We know that some town halls are adapting to that, and namely in Cascais, for example, and they are allowing the issuing, as long as we send all the necessary evidence, they are issuing online. Some town halls are not yet allowing that, but they are booking appointments. So even if it's not for the same day or for the next day, we can secure an appointment booking. And we believe that as things progress and get better within the next few weeks, this will start to go back to normal. Just a final note on if you are not a European Union citizen, we obviously also assist with that. And the process involves, there are a number of different ways to get a residency permit, but we have an excellent department that can help you with that. So
just say that.
we just go back.
For background noise.
Okay, so the first step when you want to move to Portugal, or even just make an investment to buy a property or buy a car or open a bank account, is to pay the NHR, which is basically a non-resident tax number, a 9-digit number, which will always be your Portuguese tax number. Either you are non-resident, resident, NHR, that will always be your number. But you always, if you are not a Portuguese tax resident, if you don't have, the first step is always your non-resident tax number. And we are still obtaining these numbers under the state of emergency with appointment on the local tax department by our staff or by submitting online requests. So it's not something that can still be done. And all we need is copy of passports, proof of your address outside Portugal.
Sorry, can I have a little interruption? I'm getting bothered by some of the microphones that are still on. Is it possible for you to mute all the microphones which are not talking?
Jeffrey, maybe you can help with that.
Well, thank you.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
got accents.
Something
Okay.
Dutch.
Let me continue. So the next step, you have your Portuguese tax number as non-resident, but you really want to become a Portuguese tax resident. You want to make of Portugal your main address worldwide. So what you need to do is, or through your legal representative, is to change your tax status from non-resident to resident. It's still possible. We are still doing that under the state of emergency. We need a power of attorney from you, which we can obtain online, and we can have an appointment with the local tax department by our staff,
with the government,
or we can do electronic registration through the tax authorities web portal. And that's something that we are seeing, that the reply from the tax authorities is being it's being quite expedited. We have replies in the next day, in a couple of days, so which is working very well. And finally, for those of you who want to become an HR, it's still possible to register. This is like the final step to register as an HR. What do we need? We need an online password, which we always request immediately after we obtain, after step one, after we obtain the non-resident tax number. So once we do that at that stage, and as a non-resident tax number, we are, as a firm, your tax representatives, the passwords go to our office. Our office, even though we have staff in in remote work, but every now and then all the lawyers go to the office, and there is permanent staff still in the office. So mail is delivered every day, and so we obtain these passwords within a few working days. With that, we do the electronic application, and within less than a week, sometimes it usually, before all of this happened, it used to be 1 or 2 days. Now it's not much more than that. It can be a bit more, but normally within a week, the NHR status is granted. So that's another good news. So now I think we've covered the basics of the NHR and the process. And I'm going to speak about one of the subject of this presentation, which is the new rules of NHR, which were just published on the 31st of March on the state budget for 2020. The state budget for 2020 as a history already. It was published later, much later than it should have, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and state of emergency. There had been an election later in the year, because normally it's published to enter into force on the 1st of January. And it will most likely be the first budget in at least 5 years where there will be the need for a supplementary budget, but that's for all the spending that will be necessary to accommodate. But that's another story. It is now published, and there's been, as part of the budget legislation, the budget is normally a quite lengthy document of some 300 pages, but there is it's normally where the government and the parliament enacts the most significant alterations to tax legislation. Normally when you have alterations to the IRS code, which is the individual income tax code, or the corporation code, it's in the budget. And this year we had alterations in IRS code that changed slightly the rules for NHR. We had a debate in Portugal and even outside Portugal for some years now about the NHR status. It was being very successful, and in part due to its success, it started to raise the attention of people all over the world, and also of other governments. In particular, Northern European governments, regarding a specific point of NHR. As we've seen, NHR is a tax status for all of your personal income tax, and the only point where there was some arguments was regarding pension. So the way pension income used to work under foreign NHR, with some exceptions in where the double taxation treaties were different, but in most countries, was you become a Portuguese tax resident and an NHR, and you are in receipt of a foreign pension. According to the double taxation treaty, Portugal was the country in charge of deciding on the taxation of that pension. And NHRs were declared exempt. So that means that that pension income wasn't taxed in Portugal and wasn't also taxed in the source country. Some countries, such as, for example, Finland and Sweden, started to press the Portuguese government to renegotiate the double taxation treaties to basically change from the normal or the most common model, which is pension is taxed in the country of residence, to pension would be taxed in the source country. So that, if that would start a number of countries doing the same, it would mean that even if you were an NHR in receipt of pension, your pension would be taxed in the country where it was being paid from, the source country, and not in Portugal. And so as it was detected by the Portuguese government, that was the only contentious point on NHR, the fact that pension wasn't taxed at all, it was zero anywhere. A very careful revision was made. There was a huge debate over to extend it to other types of income. But in the end, the benefits for the country of NHR were beyond question. So what was the technical decision? NHR would be obviously kept as it is, and it would be fine-tuned to accommodate the issues raised by other countries regarding pension. So pension income, foreign pension income, will now be taxed for an NHR, for new NHRs after this legislation is enacted, but with a very, very low flat rate of tax of 10%. Which should mean you would not be taxed in the source country because double taxation treaties are no longer being changed, and your overall taxation on pension would be a flat rate of 10%, which when you have in some countries a marginal rate of near 50% or even more, it's quite low. And these, as the subject of this presentation, open the door for a long future for NHR, because it was the only point where some other governments were banging on about, and it was bringing some instability, because, as you know, rumors when it regards tax and it's very common. So everyone was starting to say, oh, it's going to finish, it's good, people are going to create a 90% tax on pension. And so this was the way to stop all these rumors, to bring stability to the program, and to still, even for those with pension income, being a very, very attractive tax legislation. So NHR has indeed over the years brought many new tax residents to Portugal. We don't have the exact numbers, but we know it's somewhere between 30 and 40,000. And many are high net worth individuals and even some famous personalities. So all these people, and this is why sometimes clients ask, why is Portugal doing that? Because if people are not paying income tax, they're not paying income tax on some of the income, but they are paying VAT. They are, when they buy things, they are paying stamp duty or purchase tax when they buy the properties. They are paying car tax and helping with employment and all of that. That's why after all of this is over, NHR will be even more important for Portugal. And until now, it has contributed to an unprecedented wave of optimism, investment, and cosmopolitanism. And I'm sure once all of this unfortunate episode is over, it will bring that back. I'll just hear some examples on a more lighter note of famous NHRs who are now living in Portugal, taking all the benefits from this legislation. Oops. And so I've covered all of this. It basically summarizes what I've just explained, the whole process of amendment to the NHR legislation and the introduction of this reduced flat rate of 10% for pension income. It's a technical detail, but it's also important. The legislation has also widened the type of products which were previously not clear or even not at all under NHR beneficial income, such as, for example, some what we call pre-retirement income, some sorts of retirement saving schemes, and they are now clearly with this alteration in the law also benefiting from NHR and also benefiting of a 10% flat rate, which is very important. So apart from this, and in the end of last year, a new list of and rules for high added value activities, which we have covered, a huge number of young people, engineers, IT personnel has come to Portugal to benefit from this. And a new list, which has reviewed and broadened the previous list, is now in place. And something that was taking quite a long time, which was to get the approval of the status. So if you had this type of activities, after you become an HR, you needed to ask the tax authorities to acknowledge, to register you with a high added value activity. Now, it has been changed the way to have this status. So you basically don't need to pre-register. All you have to do is when you do your tax return, you just state that you have a high added value activity, and you mention what is your code of activity, and then the tax authorities may ask for evidence. So this has reduced from almost 1 year to have an approval as a high added value activity for being automatic. Another very important alteration. So we are, as everyone should, and governments and companies and individuals, we don't want to be stuck in the pandemic. We are thinking of the post-pandemic world, as we all should. And we are obviously assisting all our clients to go through the pandemic, but and providing solutions and thinking out of the box. But what we want is really to prepare for what's the world after the pandemic. And it's not difficult. You don't need to be an expert on finance or budgets to understand that all the expenditure that governments must now carry on, it's in the future, it will be necessary to take some measures regarding taxation. So we believe that in the post-pandemic world, even more than before, taxation and planning will be even more important than it was before. And NHR status, without any doubt, will allow the best possible tax treatment of your income. With the added bonus that you will have the NHR status and you will be living in a beautiful country. And with the third safest country in the world, with a good health system, with a fantastic weather, fantastic food, fantastic wine. And so I think it's a no-brainer, really. If you have NHR status and your main place of residence is Portugal, it will be a very good, safe and healthy post-pandemic world. So let's all hope this is sooner rather than later. We have here our contacts, my colleague Jeffrey and mine. We are more than happy to reply to your queries, to your emails. We can also arrange telephone calls, Zoom calls, WhatsApp, whatever. As I said, the message is we are here. We will continue to assist, and we are optimistic and confident in the future. Just for you to know, so those of you who don't, our main office is in Lisbon, in Praça Saldanha. We have 2 offices in the Algarve, Almancil and Lagos, and 1 office in Porto, in the north of Portugal. And we also have a representation office in London and an office in Cape Verde. So I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. We will have time for a few minutes of some questions, if they are not too specific. But any questions afterwards, you can just email us or arrange an appointment, a call, and we will be very happy to guide you through and to assist. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed, Gonçalo. Very good presentation and showing the roadmap through the NHR in these times of strange times, should we call them, and testing times and challenging times. I think what's been happening is during the presentation is that there have been a series of questions which have been filtering through. And there's a couple of those I'd like to address.
Okay, they go through you, it's probably the best way.
I think so, yeah. It's because it makes it easier to manage. So if anyone who does have a question, you have your message board there. You can put it up on the message board. I think the first question, Gonçalo, is it's quite a generic one, but actually it's a very interesting one in the context of COVID-19 and the challenges that we are all facing. And it was raised, I'm sure that John doesn't mind me saying, it was raised by John Breen. And he states that without doubt, whilst we'll get through this, we always do, we always survive. The economic landscape for national governments is going to change dramatically across the globe. Inflation is going to pick up and debt will be monumental.
Yeah.
Against this backdrop, I cannot see how all governments can avoid increasing domestic taxes. Furthermore, I cannot see how special schemes such as the NHR are going to be allowed to continue for Portugal, as to do so will increase a flight of capital from all over the world. Can you estimate how the Portuguese government will react to this difficulty?
Yes, it's a very good question indeed, and thank you very much. The very important point which we have stressed throughout the years in conferences about the NHR throughout Europe and even outside is Portugal is a European Union member state, is an OECD member state, and it has not and it has never been an offshore jurisdiction. We have a very stable tax system, and the non-habitual residency legislation is very, very similar to what other countries in Europe and the United Kingdom have in place for many years. In the case of the UK, for decades. And it's important to stress, this is not about capital. So no one is, the whole legislation of NHR is about income. So you don't need to declare capital in Portugal, but you are not exempt of any sort of capital rules or freedom of movement due to NHR. NHR is personal income tax only. In Portugal, there is no wealth tax. And basically, it combines the internal legislation with double taxation treaties that have been in place for decades all over the world, and they are not just going to stop being in place due to this. We are quite certain that, for example, what has been done in this new budget with the creation of a flat rate for pension. And the fact is that pensioners who come and live in Portugal and become an HR, they are also, the source country stops receiving the income tax of that pension, but they also stop paying the healthcare and other types of social expenditure that it was a cost in the home country, and it starts to be something that is a responsibility of the Portuguese authorities. So we believe that it's very important. This is not at all about tax evasion or offshore or anything like that. It's about attracting for a limited period of 10 years new tax residents to Portugal, and we are really very much confident that it will not change and it will not have any negative any sort of any country will ask Portugal to change legislation, because again, where the issue was, it was tackled. It was pension, and that issue was sorted. But I think national governments will not, as much as some would like to, will not make people unable to move or to travel or to live in other countries. We had decades of where people travel, where people spend their retirement in other places, and people are not just going to allow that to stop. I think we all have to adapt, but the global economy as a whole and the global population got used to that. And I think it would be an economic disaster if we all get stuck inside our own countries. That would mean, and if the governments decide to do that, that would mean going back centuries. So it's, for us, it's unthinkable, and I'm sure that will not be the case.
I also think, as a postscript to that, Gonzalo, fully agree, is that you and I saw very clearly after the 2008 crisis and global recession that the Portuguese approach in order to, I suppose, assist Portugal exit bailout and get itself economically back on its feet was to attract foreign investment through the Non Habitual Residency programs and the Golden Visa programs. And therefore, we feel that the position of Portugal in that respect is not going to change because certainly, I think a program such as Non Habitual Residency has really been good for everybody, because, as you said, Gonzalo, it's attracted some very high-level talent, high-profile individuals to Portugal, and some low-profile individuals as well, who've also contributed to the economy, and maybe not have the same sort of cachet as Madonna or Labuta, but at the same time they have helped to employ people, set up business networks, and actually increase economic ties between Portugal and other countries worldwide. And that's really where it starts. So I think our feeling is that the position of the Portuguese government should not change in that respect, and particularly given the identity of the people who hold sway within that government as well, that the programs are likely to continue.
Yes, and even internationally, I mean, there will probably be more competition from other jurisdictions, which will try to create similar or as good as legislation, which will be very difficult due to the specifics of the Portuguese program. But yes, I think both nationally and internationally, the road is open for the continuation of the success of NHR.
Okay, there have been two more questions, Gonzalo, which I'll let you answer if you don't mind,
Sure.
which are, they actually both relate to capital gains tax. So basically the rate of capital gains tax in relation to investments and the rate of capital gains tax in relation to real estate assets, both overseas. Before you answer them, Gonzalo, what I'd like to say is that unfortunately these will be the last two questions that we have, because we're supposed to wrap up at 4 o'clock. There are a number of you who have raised other questions, specific questions, for example, regarding exit of tax residency from the UK, sort of a ties test as to where you're taxed between Portugal and the UK. What I suggest is you raise those questions directly by email, either to Gonzalo or myself, and one of us or one of the team. Fortuitously, we've had a number of the team, the NHR team and COVID team, who've joined us kindly today. So you can always raise those questions. And what I'd like to do, my final sort of party piece, if you like, is I'm going to try and share a screen with you, which is, it's not allowing me to, but what I wanted to do was to share the screen for the new www.covid19legal.pt site, whereby you can obtain further information in relation to what specifically we're doing regarding COVID-19, both for individuals and for businesses. But I'll leave the last word to you, Gonzalo, in relation to those questions.
Very well, thank you. It's indeed let me still relate this to the previous question. NHR is not indeed a blanket exemption of tax, because, for example, some types of income are still taxed, even if you are an NHR. In terms of capital gains, when we are always speaking of non-Portuguese income, the dividends from, for example, from shares and interests from bonds or bank accounts are exempt for an NHR. But if you have bought Zoom shares last year, this great app that we are using, and now you decide to sell with a great capital gain, it will be subject to tax in Portugal, even if you are an NHR, on the gain, and it's taxed at 28%. So it's very clear that the tax, the idea of the tax system of an NHR is not a full exemption. You have to declare every year your worldwide income, and some of the incomes or gains can be taxed. Of course, having said that, we are here to assist to plan as efficiently as possible. And even with capital gains, there are ways which we can advise to mitigate that tax. Regarding capital gains on foreign property, on foreign real estate, and when I say foreign, I mean non-Portuguese, you are not taxed in Portugal, not just because you are an NHR, even if you were a regular Portuguese tax resident. The international rule on the global taxation treaties is that on capital gains on foreign property, you will be taxed according to the rules of the country where the property is located. So if there is any tax to be paid, it's in the country where the property that you sold with a capital gain is located. Just as a bonus, I can add that the same rule of territoriality applies to property income, such as rental income, outside Portugal. So tax is due in the country where the property is located. So you don't pay a tax in Portugal, but you may pay in the source country. So once again, thank you all very much, and we are looking forward to your emails, to your questions, and we will get back to you. Thank you.
Okay.